Devolution is the of evolution, if
Correct.
you may. And I'm not too concerned with the physical here because since we have recorded history, there really hasn't been notable evolution or physically for us to say, oh, we used to come with 7 toes and 12 fingers and now it's changed and we can see the evolution. So it's not really that noticeable. So I'm going to skip that part. But I'm going to focus on the social. And we evolved, and we evolved innately as well. And we grew to a space where we created collectives and communities. And then you look at Europe today, and it's this very advanced space in the world compared to many other parts of the world. And you think, oh, they're so forward minded in some way. No, this is the same continent that went through the 100 Years' War where people were just killing each other nonstop. This is the same continent that started World War One and Two.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Now Boarding, the podcast where we explore journeys of transformation and impact as well as global change. My guest today is someone who truly, I think, embodies what it's meant to lead with purpose and with compassion. My guest is Ali Horriyat. He's the founder of Compassivist, a charitable foundation born from a profound shift in leadership philosophy. So, thank you so much for joining me today, Ali.
No, thank you for having me.
Okay, Ali. So, what I understand is that you've had a very successful career in finance and you've made, at some point in your life, an extraordinary decision to donate your $100 million fortune to charity. So, what was the pivotal point in your life when you decided to make that decision?
The short answer is the law of diminishing returns. There was no more pleasure in making money. And that led me to if it's not about money, if my God is not money, then what is my God? What is my purpose? And that started clawing away in my mind. And I started thinking there must be more to what I'm doing because what I'm doing is just building an enormous amount of wealth. That was the beginning of it. When you say 100 million, there are billionaires out there who spend that money easily. But the thing was, I looked around and there was no more possessions to be had, no more ways to be momentarily happy, connecting all these moments together to feel I was achieving something or I had a purpose. And a few catalyst moments through that very difficult last year before I quit, I realized that I need a break. I took a break and I thought, you know what? I'm going to turn my momentum and my confidence and my success into making the changes that I want to see and I want to feel around me. And that's when I realized the problem. It wasn't really the money, it wasn't really me burning out, it wasn't any of that. It was an addiction. I was addicted and I was worshiping money. And so when I turned to philanthropy, it actually became me trying to command the things that I wanted to see through money. So when you have a lot of money, you have a lot of weight and you can do whatever you want essentially with that money. And even the charities, they say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, because that's how it works. And so I quickly realized that it's becoming a very egotistical place. And I learned that just like I've helped many of my own friends through rehab and quitting addictions and alcoholism and whatnot, this is my moment. I need to make that change. So donating the wealth was not really a donation per se. It was a donation in a recorded history. It still stands, I think, as the largest one-time donation to mental health in Canada, but it wasn't really meant for that. What it was meant for, it was to cleanse myself, was to free myself from the hold of money over me and the command of money over me. And so when I became broke, essentially, I was homeless for a short period of time, actually. And I started building my way back into creating Compassivist. And there are many moments that shaped those few years from 2016 to 2020 that Compassivist started. What I now know is what my purpose is.
How did your family, your friends? How did they react to your decision? And how did you navigate those reactions? Because they must have been, especially your family, must have been completely shocked at what you were trying to do.
They were shocked, but see, the thing is this, when you are wealthy, the decisions and choices that family members make don't become very triggering or difficult or something where you need to call a family meeting and everybody has to join together because, oh, for example, he donated his vacation home to, I don't know, a charity or something. Okay, that's crazy. I wouldn't have done it, but okay. Why? Because there's always food on the table. Nobody cares, right? So it was just Ali's going through a phase. That was the response, so to speak. But that wasn't the hard part, was a lot of people stopped speaking with me because I was actually making them a lot of money through the fund. And so they were saying, you can't quit. I have money with you. And I said, yeah, but here's your money back. It's over. It's finished. It's stopped. No, you can't stop. I'm depending on this money because I've gone and built a life around you. I've gone and I used to make, for example, $1. Now I make $1.50. So that extra 50 cents that I'm able to spend all happened because of Ali. And if Ali quits, what do I do? Right. So that was people's arguments and they started getting upset. And a lot of people stopped speaking with me. And a lot of people around me also who were enjoying the money because it went around. They stopped speaking with me because they said, "Oh, this we need to find another Ali because who's going to take us to dinner now?" A lot of that happened. And there came a time where I was not lonely, I was in solitude because I had gotten rid of the baggage and the excess, and I started growing into myself. So it was a little bit depressing at first because I lost a whole lot of people in a very short period of time who were people I communicated with regularly, people who were in my life. And all of a
And
sudden, it was just
clearly,
like,
they were, yeah,
goodbye.
so they were not really meant to be in your life.
No, no, not in this life, not in the
Not in this
rebirth.
life. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So then that's when you realized that the purpose of these people being in your life was not because they cared about you,
Mm-mm.
but they cared about all the frills
Yes,
around you. So,
they
yeah,
were friends of the title.
correct. So it's interesting how you say that you were not lonely, but it was the solitude that actually is
Mhm.
what you started to feel. So let's talk a little bit about the core mission of what you went into. And when you first founded it, what did you envision? What is it that you thought would be the next steps for it?
So to start, I'm going to explain that Compassivist is an octopus. If you don't know about the octopus is a very interesting, fascinating animal. It's really an ecosystem because it's got multiple brains, multiple hearts, all living inside one body. And they somehow have to work cohesive as a community within that body to function. I believe humans have to become one octopus. And if we can become one octopus and work cohesively and coherently and efficiently and sustainably and harmoniously, then we can function in a way that progresses the whole as opposed to the individual. And when you look at today's world, you realize the philosophies that started the systems that we have today didn't actually imply what we have today through their philosophy. So you read Adam Smith and The Wealth of Nations, and you think capitalism, the father of capitalism. That's what the Western world says. Capitalism existed way before the 1700s and the 1600s. It's been around for millennia because every time somebody traded for a benefit, that's capitalism. But what Adam Smith did is he said, you know what, we have to create a space where the individuals who are innovative, who are creative, who can bring the new to the table should be funded somehow. And the market should be able to respond to this and to advance this to a capacity where it benefits the whole. Today, we don't benefit the whole. Today, we benefit the individual. And the whole suffers because there's a finite amount of money in the market and we're continuously trying to reduce our costs at the highest level of profit. We profit this shift of balance, right? So there's a lot of inequality, and that's why the gaps are rising. I came in thinking how do we repair this? And how do we readjust the mindset? Because systems and technologies aren't fixing it. There are charities out there that are proud of being hundreds of years old. And we feel, oh, they're 150 years fighting poverty so long. But no, if you come from the business world, nobody will invest in you if you go out there and say, this is what I do, this is my vision, this is my mission, and it's been 200 years that I have not reached my mission. But please invest some more. No, you have 3 years to give me an exit strategy. That's where my funds money is going. And if it's clear, and if I see you hit your exit, I will reinvest in your next story. But if you don't make that exit, and if you don't do it right over those 3 years that you've given me the proposal and the presentation, I'm not interested. I looked around the charity world and I realized the strength of a charity is its longevity. It's how long have you been around? How well are you doing? How good is your marketing? Do I see your billboards everywhere? Those billboards cost 30, 40,000 euros a month. You start getting into the weeds of it and you understand something's wrong. So I didn't want to create another charity. I wanted to create a movement. I still do. The Compassivist is a movement. The charity Compassivist Foundation is one tentacle of the movement. So within that Compassivist octopus, we have publishing, we have a show, we have TV, we have podcasts, we have the arts, we have a kitchen, we have a coffee program, we have a carbon labeling program, and we have many more programs. So each of those is a tentacle that brings in people. And we have Compassicon, which is our annual compassion event, compassion convention, so to speak, which is the first and the only and the largest in the world.
And where
Um,
is it normally held?
so we had a couple of small test programs, but we're launching in Vegas in 2026 in April. And then every year we're going to move to a new city. So Vegas 1 year, London 1 year, Cairo 1 year, Buenos Aires 1 year. The idea is to take a compassion-filled arts events with music and film awards and book awards and everything else dedicated towards activating compassion versus the quality of the art. So today you have the Oscars, and what they are awarding or rewarding is how well you acted, how good the script was, how good the sound was. It's all technical. But there's no award in there to say this moved the world. This film that you create, because that's where the artist comes in. When you go into film, you want to tell your story through film. But then you get caught in my camera work has to be really well to win the award, not my story anymore, right? So you can have a very poor story, but a very great cast and amazing people, teams working for you, costume and everything else, and you will win all the awards. But if you have a really good story, but it's not very well presented on the screen, you don't win awards. It doesn't matter how well the story is. And what we want to do in the film fest is to reverse that and say, no, the story matters. And the stories we tell should come from the places that deserve to be told, not just the celebrities, not just let's tell the king's story over and over and over again, 50 different times in ways over the last 3 decades. No, let's tell stories from places that we don't hear about. Let's tell people stories of why Congo is producing 70% of the world's cobalt, but it's one of the poorest countries in the world. Can we follow somebody through the mines and tell that? So can we follow a child? So when you buy your Tesla, you feel not so good about how you are interacting in the world. Can we tell that story through film? Can we tell it through a book? Can we tell it statistically? How many different expressions of art can we use to say this? Because revolutions began with the art. Social revolutions always began in the art, whether it was the Communist Manifesto changing the entire face or other forms of art throughout history, even religion practiced through the arts. You go to churches and you see all the murals and you see all the glass. What I'm doing at core is a movement to activate a shifting mindset. It's not to for people to donate because I think that's a very poor model as well. You are allowing people to pay off their guilt. So you go and you pay into an animal charity or at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'll stop by the animal shelter where they're keeping some cute dogs and I'll give them £100. And by noon, I'm having steak. That £100 is not really to help animals per se or to understand welfare or rights of animals. No, it's just buying off my guilt. I'm participating in cruelty, but it's like religion. I'll go and I'll do something immoral at 10 a.m. And at 1 p.m., I'll go to the sermon and I'll put $100 into the hat that goes around the church. I leave church, I feel better about the sin I committed at 10 a.m. The moral degradation feels so much better now. So this model we practice continuously throughout time. And
Yeah.
charity is the same thing. So on a donation model, that's why the world hasn't changed. It's deteriorating. It's because we're not activating people to act within the donation model. And you see it creeping into environmentalism now too, where offsetting models. Go on the flight, go first class if you can, doesn't matter. You just have to pay a little more for trees. Do whatever you want. Doesn't matter. You don't need to be environmental. You don't need to be conscious. You don't need to consume intelligently. None of that. Complete your overconsumption to the highest success that you can. Just, you know what? Come over here and plant 400 trees a year because that's what we calculated your offset is. But I still have not found one scientist who can explain to me that offset actually works. So you see, this model is transactional. And what we're trying to do at Compassivist is getting people to come in with their arts, to come in with their expressions, to join the community, to raise a community through Compassicon, which is the Compassion Olympics going here to different places, to target regional issues. Because when we're having it in Vegas, we want to target issues that America faces. Right under that very famous Vegas Strip are people living underground, are people living in the sewage system. They're called the mole people. If you look it up on YouTube or anywhere, you'll see they live there. You're gambling upstairs millions of dollars a day. Below you are people who live in sewers because they don't have money. Let's publicize that. Let's see how people react to that. Let's see what people are willing to do about the homeless situation in the United States right now. But when you go to Rio or Buenos Aires, it's a completely different issue. How do you mobilize people to make those changes? How do you mobilize people to really affect community? You come to Europe, you go to Asia, you go to different parts of Asia, you go to China's a different world to India. They don't have the same problems. But when you show up there and you're bringing music and culture and the arts, that makes change with happiness, with joy, with togetherness. It's not the kind of change where you want to bring violence, because I also don't think that works. It just changes one tyrant for another. Because when you come in and you're so tyrannical that you can overthrow a regime, whether it's a coup d'etat or an actual civil war, you didn't come in with compassion. So we keep that in mind. We keep that in mind that what we want to do when we come for change is the same things that peaceful change brought. So when you look at people like Martin Luther King, Mandela, and when you look at Gandhi, or when you look at even Mother Teresa, the institution she built wasn't under the auspices of the Catholic Church at the time. She had a lot of problems with them, basically, to be able to talk about India, talk about Calcutta, talk about the issues going on, the trafficking, the children, and all of that. And today, there are many foundations built on the back of what she created in terms of the social understanding of people willing to invest in this or people willing to donate in this, and people reducing that feeling of if somebody's poor, it's okay to take advantage of them. So those things change, but they change in a peaceful way.
Yeah.
And they're more effective than any bombing or any killing. So that is the core of what we do.
So essentially, what I hear you say is that through storytelling and through the arts, it is possible to communicate, and it's possible to send out messages, and it's possible to create a movement, which is what you're trying to do. And I feel like you're doing it very successfully. And I hear that you've done and led projects in so many different parts of the world. So whether it's Africa or the US or Asia
Mhm.
or the Middle East, and the cultures are so different and the understanding is so different. Challenges have you actually faced? You've been leading all these projects across these different parts of the world. And what has been the most rewarding for you?
So the projects that we pick are not necessarily for the merit of the project itself. The reason I select the collaborations that I have is because these can perpetually grow into solving a lot of the world's issues. And I'll give you quick examples. We work with the Maasai people in Africa, and we work with a great person, Dr. Robert Lang, who was a Harvard physicist. And he quit his comfortable Massachusetts life and all his accolades and professor, doctor, and all of that to move to where the Maasai live and live with them, within them, as them, essentially supporting them. And what he's been able to do is he's been able to support the people by bringing tech to their lives, bringing better understandings of healthcare, of dealing with their cattle through climate change and things that they just historically don't have the knowledge anymore to keep up with. And he's been supporting them with new age stuff like IPs. And I see if we can help them achieve the goals that they want and maintain their society and be respected and not have to lose themselves and integrate into a new world as under a new name or change their clothing or their culture, we can replicate this in Brazil. We can replicate it to the indigenous communities of North America and Australia. We can replicate this into many different communities in India. People don't know this, but if you ever can take a trip from the northern border of Kashmir at Pakistan and do your way down all the way to Kerala and the border of Sri Lanka, you will meet different planets of cultures. Okay. It's not like the UK where you'll have a little bit of different accents, but essentially it's the same culture. It's not. It's different languages, different religions, different people, different mentalities, different banking structures, absolutely different. One Indian friend of mine says the only thing that is the same is the asphalt we drive on. But other than that, it's completely different. So this project, for example, can bring that to all the world. What we do here successfully can be replicated globally so that these communities don't have to lose their stories because they have to integrate, because they've lost their lands, because we've been comfortable bullying them or oppressing them. So that's one example. Another quick example is the project we have in Jordan with the University of Sheffield. And again, with refugees, a lot of times wars break out, civil war breaks out, and people are moved into camps, refugee camps. And in those refugee camps, the UN's goal is not to transition these people into a new life or support them in the transition. It's to maintain them within the walls of that it's safe. People aren't going to attack them here. The UN's behind this. There's a flag of the UN, so we all respect that. And they keep them there, however long the war takes, because it's not the UN's camp authority business to
Yeah.
say let's get these people on with their lives. The camp's been there for a decade. There are kids who are 10 years old now who were born in the camp. They've never seen anything other than the camp. They've never had education because we're all waiting. So we got involved to say, how about if we can transition them? And we went in there and we said, these people are farmers. Why don't we buy a plot of land in Jordan, put prefab homes in there, move them in there, give them a co-op ownership of the land, let them farm as they were, let them sell their produce and their vegetation and their agriculture and start having life and let their kids go to school and let them have access to healthcare and food and everything else. Okay, let's do that. Can we do that? Of course we can. It needs a little bit of money, but we can do that. And now they're being moved about 3,000 people at a time into new development and new space into the co-op system and for them to be able to grow through that in their own communities. What is the benefit of this? If you've ever been to Bangladesh, there's a camp there that's bigger than most metropolitan cities. Can we help them in this same manner? If you go to Calais, can we help them in the same manner? If you go to the southern border of US and Mexico, can we help the people there into integrating into society again? And can this be advantageous to the whole? Because you're reducing people's traumas, you're giving them hope, you're allowing them to dream again. So it's not about oh, we're in this project to help this camp. All of our projects are, again, the bigger picture. How can this be global? How can this create mindset shifts? How can people get involved? How can we change even the models that don't work? Because if you're the UN and you have unlimited access to funds and authority at some point, should you not be concerned with what if the Civil War takes 2 decades? Do I just let 20 years of people's lives in this camp just go to waste? What happens to the 20-year-old kid who leaves the camp when everything's free with all their trauma? Are they going to integrate into society and be the average 20-year-old? No. And then we have crimes, and then we have problems, and then we have increases in mental illnesses and all these other things that become burdens on society. But then we look at the refugee that we took in and say, that's what happens when you let refugees in. That's what happens. We should send them all back. And then we have what we have in Europe today, extremism growing.
Yeah,
The elections in Germany last weekend, prior to that, the elections in France, they both escaped by a hairline
yeah,
to the right wing, right? By a hairline.
yeah,
And people sit there, oh, the US didn't escape. And so here we are. Why are these things happening? It's not the refugees' fault, it's our systemic faults.
yeah,
So the arts is supporting
yeah,
systemic change. That's really what it's about. And when you said earlier, we're trying to see the possibility of the arts doing that, that's not true because the arts has done that continuously. If you look into our history, the arts was the reason for our revolutions. Every single revolution had an expression coming in from the public before the actual arms were taken up, before the shovels came out and people started fighting. Before any of that, there was expression as arts. All we're doing is returning to the roots of how the masses would really dictate democracy instead of the oligarchy.
yeah. Somewhere you've described humans as devolving and not evolving. So, can you share what you mean by that and how you've talked a little bit about compassion, a lot about compassion, but also how compassion plays a role in our evolution?
Devolution. So, devolution is the of evolution,
Correct.
if you may. And I'm not too concerned with the physical here because since we have recorded history, there really hasn't been notable evolution or physically for us to say, oh, we used to come with 7 toes and 12 fingers, and now it's changed and we can see the evolution. So it's not really that noticeable. So I'm going to skip that part, but I'm going to focus on the social. And we evolved, and we evolved innately as well. And we grew to a space where we created collectives and communities. And then you look at Europe today, and it's this very advanced space in the world compared to many other parts of the world. And you think, oh, they're so forward-minded in some way. No, this is the same continent that went through the Hundred Years' War where people were just killing each other nonstop. This is the same continent that started World War One and Two, just less than 100 years ago. It isn't, but it evolved beyond this. And now you have the EU, right? You have this huge communion of countries that said, let's come together and see how much better this can be as one unit, right? They're trying to build the octopus, so to speak. That's what it is. It's many different minds, many different hearts, all in one space. And so you see this evolution happening. But in the last few years, what are we really seeing is the threats of the EU breaking. We saw Brexit, that's a threat.
Yeah.
Then we saw extremism boiling. That's another threat. We see in Spain the Catalan issue really coming up in ways that is becoming somewhat violent now, where it wasn't. And in many parts of Europe, if you pay attention, you're seeing it disintegrate in some ways. It's not fortifying, it's not becoming stronger. And so the alliances are shifting, and you're seeing these problems start to boil, right? And so you find social devolution happening that way. And by our growing interest in money, we are selling our values for money, essentially. And so the capitalist God, we tend to teach people that capitalism is an economic order. But I beg to differ. I think capitalism is a social order because it influences the way we live, it influences our social structures, and it's just as much a social order as democracy or as communism or any of the other social orders and or socialism. And I think in this advanced state of capitalism, we have to devolve to be able to continuously grow for capitalism, because capitalism's idea is economic growth no matter what. So
Yeah.
whether it's the 2% margin or whatever the economics gods say, the point is we have to grow. Now we're living on a finite planet with finite resources. And so climate change is a real thing because you cannot destroy and be fine all the time. And we're seeing the numbers. It's not a matter of I'm not talking about climate change as that metaphysical idea. I'm talking about the actual reality we see in the oceans and the temperatures and the floods and everything else that's happening. And we see how people are displaced by the hundreds of millions. And so you need to devolve to a certain level of being complacent to this disaster, being complacent to the Palisades in California burning. And it's not even in the news. It was in the news the moment it was burning for a day or two because people were interested in the media at that moment because they wanted to see a few celebrities' homes burning and what
Yeah.
it looks like, and they want to see a few animals running out in fire, and it's Hollywood culture. So we're watching that, and we're taking it in on our social media and everywhere else we get our news from, and we're enjoying it. But then 2 days later, something else comes along, and we don't have the attention span.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people are talking about how they're rebuilding the area right now, and so we go on. And so that's the evolution because nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. The Syrian people, nobody even talks about Syria anymore. We've shifted to Ukraine. For a while, Ukraine wasn't even important anymore because we shifted to other things. And then all of a sudden it's important again because, oh my God, it might
Yeah.
break
Yeah.
out into World War III. So now it's news. To be able to Gaza happens, and now Gaza's not so important anymore. We're just moving the people. Not to discuss the politics, but the reality of us having no moral compass in any of this and the reality of the President of the United States presenting Gaza as a strip of a newly built space, it's all financial. There was nothing in that video that showcases how people are living harmoniously in that space now. There's a lot of glitter. There's the Trump Tower. There's all this beauty, right? There's all this resort laying on the beach in the Mediterranean and all of that. But I don't see harmony in there. But I did see a girl half naked going, woman. So is that what we're promoting? Is that what we're devolving to? There's going to be a lot of money being made there, and we're going to have brothels and we're going to have resorts, and it's going to be lovely. Yes, we are. So the fact that we sit there and shake our heads and say, no, we would never, no, we do. We will. And we have continuously. And so that's why we're devolving. We're socially devolving. We've lost that. We've sold our morals. We have no ethics because money talks. And it's how much you can pay for that ethics. In some places and in some desperate situations, it's cheap because people aren't seeing that amount of money. You go to a wealthier standard, it just becomes more expensive. That's it. But the concept of devolution is there socially. So that's what I talk about when I speak about that. And your next question was speaking about compassion in what terms?
Oh my God, you've said so much. Oh, yeah. In how does it impact? What kind of a global impact would it have?
So compassion essentially by itself is useless in the sense that which is why I came up with the word compassivist because I'll take you to Toronto with me, okay? Imagine you're in Toronto with me right now at the end of February where it's -10, -20 degrees Celsius. We're walking downtown Toronto on the sidewalk, and there are people there who are homeless. They sleep there in that temperature at night. When we walk by, we're not laughing at them, right? Because that would be really rude. That would be really unethical. We're going to say, oh, poor guys. But we're going to continue walking. So we say we had compassion for them. But what'd you do? What did I do? Nothing. We continued. We went to a coffee shop. We had really warm coffee. and we bundled up and it was warm inside and we were fine. And then we got into the car and we drove away and we were comfortable and we continue our comfortable lives. Those people on the sidewalk still stayed there. So for me, compassion doesn't do anything. You and I can cry the whole night till the morning about them. It still won't change their lives.
So it's
So
action.
it's the action
Action.
in compassion that
Yeah.
makes you make the change. So compassivist means the person who allows their compassion to lead them into action. So the mind is a modular mind. Buddha started this idea of the modular mind, but then it got proven by science. So now we accept it. It's no longer a religious thing, it's an actual concept, right? And the modular mind means that in every instance, the module that's supposed to give you the best outcome will, if you and I are continuing walking down the street in Toronto and somebody pulls a gun and starts chasing us, we're going to start running. We're not going to bargain with them to see how much we can buy the gun from them because that is an economic module. It's not coming in. Right now, we're in flight mode. So every module takes over. The idea of enlightenment, essentially, or mindfulness at its highest peak, at its idealist level, is maintaining compassion as the module that's leading you throughout, no matter what. So whether a shark is eating you, instead of poking its eye, knowing you're still going to die, don't poke its eye, just die. But it's easy to say because you're just going to hurt the animal. You're still going to die. So why would you hurt the animal? You were just food. It's not acting cruelly. This is very easy for any human to sit there and actually be like, okay, eat me faster. It's hurting a little bit. I'm sorry, Mr. Shark. So that's not the way it happens, but
Yeah.
that is the ideal of it. And so compassion in action really is the idea of if we act on everything we pretend we care about in our mental bubble, that's when we know who we are. Are you acting on the things that you are scrolling and crying about? You're on Instagram, you're seeing all this horrible stuff. Oh my God, that's so horrible. Or you read the news. Oh, I just read this news. It's so horrible. What are you doing about it? Nothing. I'm busy. That's the evolution of compassion because you're not activating yourself. So the idea of Compassive East is compassion in action. And there's an E at the end, which we've discussed. It stands to remind everyone that when you are a compassivist, when people ask you, what are you? And instead of saying whatever you used to say, you find yourself and you act in that way and you say, I am a compassivist. You're saying it in that tone and with the E at the end to recognize the feminism in the word, to recognize that you are a feminist when you become a compassivist because you care about the state of the world. You care about your octopus. The root of feminism is the mother, is Mother Nature, is the universe, is the way the universe is. Whether you believe in God or you want to take a purely dogmatic science of chance, doesn't matter. Both of them will tell you the planet heals, the planet gives,
Yeah.
right? An apple tree gives you apples. We eat the apple, we sustain, we stay alive. That's motherly. A mother's breast milk feeds, the baby grows. That's motherly. It's the same concept all around the universe. So when you're a feminist, at core, you are a person saying that I care about the future. I care to nurture the future. And if you are stable in your head and your heart, you're going to want the best future for your offsprings or for your octopus growing. And so that's what Compassivist is about, compassion and action with the root form of feminism so that we can have a better world.
So that really is your ultimate goal with Compassivist, is to have a world where there is compassion, but the compassion needs to have an action in order for us to see an impact.
Where our actions are led by our compassionate hearts.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
And okay, yeah. So that's your ultimate goal. Interesting. In
Yes. And
yeah,
to establish the systems that promote this and support this and allow this to be frictionless because you can have a lot of activists. And the word activist today implies going against the grain or
yeah,
going against
yeah,
society, right? The status quo. So Today you'll see the G7 meetings, and then you see all these activists with placards yelling and screaming, or environmental activists standing in front of drilling places and whatnot. And oh, they're activists. So it's always looked at as these minorities in the negative, so to speak. But if you change systems to a place where we are making those good decisions and we are acting on those good decisions, then the word activist doesn't really mean anything anymore because everybody is flowing together frictionless. So we're all flowing with nature in the way that best promotes the world. And if we're doing that, then it's really just your activism becomes defined as the action that you take, the force that you're putting in, the momentum that you're supporting with. How much force are you delivering to the goodness of life, right? And so that's the ultimate goal is really to change those systems so that they appreciate that and they support it and they allow it to grow. Because if you want to provide your children with the best education that they can, but the world tells you can't unless you're very wealthy and unless you live in specific cities and unless you have so many privileges added up for you to be able to provide that level of education, then it's going against your grain. It's going against your wishes. Now you have to fight so hard to position yourself there. But when you're fighting so hard to position yourself there, you're not really doing it for the public. You're capitalizing. You're putting your capitalist mindset on saying, I need to do whatever it takes to get my child into that education system because that's a better future for my child. But never mind everybody around me.
Yeah.
I left the ghetto. I grew out of it. I did what I had to do to provide for my family. And so that doesn't change either because maybe 100 individuals, you look at India, some of the wealthiest people in the world. The way that they've met, the way the Ambanis or the Tatas happened, you cannot replicate that societally. It's not a shift for society. Right across the Ambani Palace is the largest ghetto in Mumbai. That ghetto is not going away because they got wealthy. So systemic shift is part of the act of wealth to equalize through the spaces and not to segregate. And the problem today is we have to be so careful that we're not just thinking we're going to be activists and we're going to fight the system. No, we want a system where we don't need to be activists in. We want a system where we don't need charities. We want a system because these are all let me go become a billionaire so I can give 2% of my billion to solve a problem that I caused, that will never go away
Yeah.
because no, for as long as I live and the
Yeah.
portion of wealth that I hold, this cannot go away.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to just keep feeding it enough that satisfies these people to hope and dream for staying alive and not to revolt and come and tear me down. And that's what charity is. We need to change those institutions systemically.
Yeah. Woof. Thank you so much, Ali. You've inspired me as well. And I'm sure all the people who will eventually listen in or watch will completely understand, hopefully, where you're coming from. And I think we need more and more people like yourself to help bring this change and to work towards it. And I hope people who've listened in will pick up from what you've said, whether it's individuals or whether it's large scale communities. I think it's important and it's a life lesson here. So thank you so much. And I do hope to be able to follow your work and maybe also be a part of it because I think it's so important to have that. As you mentioned, the action is so important. That's one aspect of it. And storytelling and the arts are an integral part of bringing about change. And that's really what you're working towards. Any last thoughts before we end this conversation?
Last thought is building on what you said, the action is what matters because memorizing religious texts, getting all the PhDs in the world, doing all of this in your mind and never using it, any of it to actually bring goodness, to bring positivity, to do something where you have to remember to ask yourself, if I were to die right now, what would the balance of my presence be in this world? Would it have been a positive contribution? And how much more positive would it have been had I acted in the ways that I wish I'd acted, or in the ways that I thought about acting in my mind? It's always test yourself, know yourself, and act in the ways that you know you should, not in the ways that you ought to because of capitalist reasons.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Once again, thank you so much, Ali. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation.
You have a wonderful day ahead of you.